Hello viewers, in this particular lecture on microbiology, I shall be discussing some aspects of food spoilage, and here I shall be discussing the different types of food spoilage and also the factors that affect food spoilage, and then I shall get into individual food items and will discuss the different ways by which these food items are getting spoiled, and maybe I will also discuss some ways by which we can prevent it. Now, to start with, the definition of spoilage is that it includes damages or injuries that make the food undesirable for human consumption, which can be due to the result of insect damage, physical injury, microbial activity, and of course, enzymatic degradation produced from the food itself or produced from the degrading food itself. The appearance of the food is most important. When we see these gram seeds with holes in it created by insect larvae, then immediately we understand that this food is not fit for consumption. Or when this nice piece of cookies have been affected by arthropods or insects of different types, then naturally we need to remove them before consumption, or if it is degraded, we cannot take it. If this packet of strawberry is having this mycelial growth, mind you, this also is not fit for consumption because you never know what type of toxin is being produced by this fungal mycelia. This is another way by which the fruit is being actually suffering from some external pressure or damage or enzymatic degradation, and the food becomes degraded and naturally it is not fit for consumption. But most importantly, the enzymes produced within the food actually will convert the different sugar molecules into other forms of monosaccharide or phosphate sugar or phosphogluconate, and that also is not fit for consumption. But this degradation is slowly depending upon the condition in which it is stored, and it is definitely changing the texture of the food. Now, coming to the appearance, the food obviously will show, like this piece of bread will show the growth of mold. So the appearance changes. Sometimes if it is a liquid like this non-alcoholic beverage, will have growth of fungal mycelia or it becomes cloudy. Sometimes the color changes. Animal meat or animal flesh will have hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin is getting degraded by different microbial enzymes, and it will produce different other protein which actually is toxic. So not only the food texture is modified, but it becomes toxic in the long run because of enzymatic degradation of meat. Now, coming to the appearance of the food may appear slimy because of the growth of the bacteria and the production of the extraneous slimy wall. The food becomes slimy. Or if it is a vegetable, the vegetable, because of the effect of fungal or bacterial infection, will develop rots. So this rotten change in the vegetable is also textural change in the food item. Or sometimes it may show some modification. Say for example, histidine is a particular amino acid which is producing histamine, which is a protein that may cause allergy. So a degraded food may contain components for allergic reaction in human body. Now, coming to the different factors, obviously one is environment. There may be the internal factors within the food. Of course, the handling and the way it is packaged. These are the major factors that contribute towards the contamination or spoilage of food. Now, to start with, we have the fresh meat. This is a unique chunk of meat with high myoglobin content. So it is appear red, but you never know what is the bacteria within or how far it is degraded until and unless you examine it. And when you examine it, you will find the growth of different bacteria. Like here in the muscle fiber, you can have the acinetobacter, this rod-shaped, and the round or small rods which are some sort of dimorphic growth. There may be the gram-negative moraxella or the Clostridium perfringens also causing the contamination of meat. And mind you, these organisms can grow in very low temperature, causing contamination or causing spoilage. Now the question is, at which particular concentration this particular bacteria will be considered to be harmful? If we calculate the colony forming units, if the number of units, these discrete spots, are more than 10 to the power 7, then we definitely say that the bacterial concentration is high enough to cause contamination, or the food is contaminated, not fit for human consumption. Now coming to the mechanically ground meat, of course it is fresh meat, but it is mechanically minced. You never know, these certain areas, discolored areas, are also bacterial infestation present. And these bacteria may include the Pseudomonas, and this Pseudomonas can actually produce toxin which can be very harmful for human system. And basically, when we want to protect us, obviously we need to see how it is packaged or how it is delivered in the market. But the question is, when we consider this particular packed food, like this one is vacuum packaged beef, this may also contain contamination. And this contamination may come from Carnobacterium, and it also can come from the lactobacillus, which is definitely growing even in high concentration of nitrate, which is coming from the nitrogen. But this particular bacteria will grow in vacuum condition and will contaminate the packaged food. So when we see the packaged food, we should not be happy enough that there is no contamination. There may be Yersinia enterolytica, which can also tolerate high concentration of sulfide or even peroxide. So they can be present in stringent of condition in the food. A very common phenomenon is the greening of meat or greening of processed meat. And this may be by lactobacillus because of the production of lactic acid, or maybe due to the production of hydrogen peroxide by lactobacillus. Another possible way of greening is the growth of Salmonella putrefaciens, causing the putrefaction by hydrogen sulfide production, also causing greening of meat sample. A very common cause is the change of the pigment. This greening is caused by the change of the pigment, which is myoglobin. So myoglobin is converted to metmyoglobin, then it is converted to nitrosyl metmyoglobin, then to nitrosyl myoglobin, and finally it is producing the nitrosyl myochrome, which is actually the discolored pigment. And obviously this particular reaction is helped by nitrate or nitrite radical and also sulfide. So we call it, this greening is caused by sulfide and nitrite. So under any condition, if we can reduce the level of sulfide, reduce the level of nitrite, this greening can be minimized, and obviously the bacteria will not grow properly and the greening will not be there. Another very common way to understand that the meat is not very suitable for consumption is the bad odor. And this odor actually comes from the production of different acetic compounds or some byproducts of acetyl-CoA, which may be the acetoacetate converted to diacetyl compound, which will be converted to acetoin. And this acetoin or butanediol production in the meat is making it not only unfavorable for consumption but also toxic for consumption. And sometimes the fermentation can be bad enough to generate organic acid like acetic acid, imparting sour texture, and also ethanol, which is also not maintaining the food taste. So foul odor definitely can be easily understood. And sometimes, you see, nitrate is toxic for higher animals. It can also be toxic to bacteria. There are certain bacteria or extremophilic bacteria like the Brochothrix thermosfacta, which can actually grow in high nitrate concentration in the meat, and that is bad enough. Now coming to packaged food. Now you see, there are different types of food which are packaged, like this sausage, which is packed food. This also can be contaminated by the slimy growth of bacteria. And it also can be soured by the production of lactic acid by simple bacteria like lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is not that toxic, but the texture of the meat is lost because of the production of high amount of lactic acid, which actually comes from the pyruvic acid, which is a byproduct of a normal metabolic pathway of the bacteria, like the glycolysis. Now, how to prevent this particular packed food? Very commonly, there is a very common method. They call it smoking of bacon. Bacon is a processed meat which is smoked in a typical oven. Or it can be very nicely preserved in brine to minimize the bacterial growth, or in other words, to minimize the microorganism growth because of osmotic shock. Now, coming to another very important product that we consume is the poultry food. Now, commonly, poultry contamination comes from the microbe present in the poultry bird itself. And it is not that apparent. Because of the low temperature, this microbe will not grow. But whenever the temperature increases, there will be discoloration. These blue colonies are nothing but gram-positive bacterial colony growing on the poultry bird legs, which are commonly consumed. And these bacteria may include the Pseudomonas, the Acinetobacter, the Psychrobacter on one side. Similarly, in modified atmosphere, it may have Lactobacillus, Carnobacterium, Brochothrix, Shewanella. All these are growing in meat also. And also, it may have fungi like Candida and yeasts or Yaroia. Our ideal way to see whether the poultry is contaminated or the poultry flesh is contaminated is to have the UV test. If, say, for example, under UV exposure there is some Pseudomonas growing, then they will fluoresce. So, fluorescence in the surface of that particular poultry flesh definitely indicates contamination. Of course, there are other signs to understand. That means the discoloration, the slimy growth, the distaste. These are also common ways to understand contamination. And of course, it is to be protected through proper maintenance, proper packaging. Coming to the next important food item is fish. Actually, they are important because they are having very high protein content and also some unique fatty acid like the omega-3 fatty acid. Fish contamination is relatively easy to understand because of discoloration, because of foul odor. And of course, this contamination comes from the pond where it is growing, or whether that pond water is contaminated having these dead fishes. So in both ways it is toxic. The pond is contaminated because of organic chemicals, and at the same time the dead fishes will harbor different microbes which are harmful for others. Not only for the fishes growing, also for us who are consuming it. And these microbes may include the Pseudomonas, different species, Moraxella, Aerobacter, Lactobacillus, Micrococcus, different types of bacteria. And mind you, some of these bacteria can grow in very low temperature. So even if you keep it in fridge, it may be contaminated. Another very common way is actually the production of trimethyl ammonium compounds, which is actually produced from choline or vitamins, and they produce acetate and trimethylamine, which is a very common cause of poisoning of fish. We come to another type of organisms which is not fish, but it is prawn. That is, we call it crustacea. Crustaceans get contaminated by bacteria and dinoflagellates, and they can easily be understood by their color. So a crustacea which is naturally red in color, it becomes very difficult to understand whether there is contamination or not. Say for example, this is a microsporidian, that is the Thelohania, which is infection causing organism in this particular shrimp. You can see this infection is occurring in the shrimp body, and these are the spores of this Thelohania rather, and they can also grow in the muscles, they can grow in the gills, and they can even grow in the different parts of the digestive system. And that is one reason when we are buying shrimp, the digestive system or the alimentary canal is taken out. Otherwise, it becomes a source of contamination, and the more it is kept, this particular bacteria will percolate into the flesh, causing contamination. A very common way of marine food contamination is coming through mollusk, and these bacteria remain in the soft mantle cavity of this mollusk, and they can actually impart severe toxicity in human because of their extremophilic nature. So very commonly when we see a particular mollusk, a careful examination can actually see that okay, there is bacterial colony growing inside causing lesion. A microscopic examination will show definite areas of bacterial contamination within the muscles. A very important point is shellfish poisoning, not because of the shellfish, but because of these toxic dinoflagellates. These dinoflagellates may be the Gambieri discus, the Lingulodium, and the Protoceratium. These are dinoflagellates producing toxin, and this toxin are ultimately causing paralysis in human. So shellfish consumption should be avoided as far as practicable. So in this particular lecture, what I have discussed is, I have discussed what is food spoilage, how food gets spoiled, what are the different ways of spoilage, how to understand spoilage on one side, and then I have discussed different non-vegetarian items starting with normal meat, minced meat, processed meat, vacuum packaged meat, their cause of contamination and prevention, and then I have got into poultry flesh or poultry meat, and then I have got into fishes, crustaceans and mollusk contamination, and how we should understand them and how we should prevent them. Thank you.